All right, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the show. I'm joined with Tom Rabbit from his channel. If anybody doesn't know, I've posted his link down in the description below. We're here to have a discussion about Darth Dawkins and Dawkins shenanigans. Also scheduled to join us will be Danny from his channel. His YouTube channel is called Phil Talk. Their link for that is down below as well. He's supposed to come in here and kind of offer some insight into this, what we're going to be going over. I guess what I had a video kind of picked out earlier, and it was one of Tom Rabbit's excerpts that he had done where Darth Dawkins was having they're not conversations. It's really more like more of an ambush.
Interrogation.
The interrogation, yeah. With Discord user, YouTube user, whatever, named Poji, and that video is also on his. I encourage you to go watch that. It's not real long. There's some, even though she's not a particularly strong debater, and she admits she doesn't want to be. She manages in the course of their conversation to get him to say some things that are kind of silly. So anyway, before we get off on a tangent, I just want to give Tom a chance to introduce himself.
Yeah, I mean, you probably know my channel. If you're watching this, I mostly catalog and do videos about Darth Dawkins currently. They're like Jefferson said, look, these aren't really conversations most of the time. They're interrogations and basically how to not be a Christian, right? This is I mean, what else is there to say?
Yeah. So yeah, and like I said, the link for Tom's channel, it's a source of entertainment for me. Tom, I do appreciate the videos that you put together, because often when I am at work punching away doing my bureaucratic data entry stuff, I will put one of those things on at about double speed and just listen to the insanity wash over me.
Right. They're great. They're entertainment. That's what they are. They're entertainment.
User Lori Hayes is Darth is in Rage's chat right now. So yeah, the Raging Atheist was live before I went live, and apparently his conversation with Randolph Richardson has attracted Darth over there. Well, that's good. That kind of keeps him out of here, because I don't want him. I don't want him coming over here and trying to run his shtick when Tom and I are trying to run him down. So we're here to talk about Darth behind his back. We can talk to him, later. Let's see.
Danny's here. Okay.
Yes, he is. He finally made it in here.
Let's see. I got the time zone wrong. And Darth wouldn't come in here because I'm one of those people where if I start talking to him, he'll just leave.
So. Yeah, I'm kind of becoming that way, although he's got me listed as like, quote unquote, a keyboard. Somebody's got me classified as a keyboard warrior on the Reformation Discord server, which is fine. I don't care. The biggest reason I don't usually jump in there is because when they're on and talking about something and it's starting to get kind of heated, it's usually the middle of my workday, so I can't really join. And usually by the end of my workday, I'm not really interested in 5 o'clock rolls around. I'm not going to jump into a conversation with him and Antonio, aka the 35-year-old virgin, and listen to these idiots, just beat me down. It's like, look, I have to handle customer service calls. Like I can get plenty of abuse on my own, and I get paid for that. I'm not going to do it for free after hours. So yeah, I mean, it's sort of on my time. Maybe one of these weekends I'll jump in there when they're on there, and we'll see.
Well, I have a question then to start off our conversation about Darth. I don't know if you already have like footage that we could and with timestamps that might be interesting to review, but maybe not.
I did initially think that what I was going to go over was the one with Poji. And while I'm getting this kind of spooled up, Danny, if you want to give a quick introduction to anybody in here, if you don't want to be that formal about it, you don't have to. But if you want to.
Yeah, I'm Danny. I have a YouTube channel, and I'm sort of active. I'm less active now, but I'm always active on Discord. But that's all. If you're interested in what I have to say, you can the link below in the description.
Yeah, I mean, I can. I know. Well, I can do it for you, Danny. Danny has a YouTube channel. It's called Phil Talk. Actually, has nothing to do with philosophy. It's actually just about a guy named Phil. He lives in the same cul-de-sac as Danny. Danny doesn't actually know him, but Danny does a vlog about the different athleisure that Phil wears while he's taking out his trash and checking his mail. That's all it is.
Like I said, if you're interested in it, there's a description. Look in the description.
There's a lot of clandestine camera.
Wears a lot of Adidas for some reason. I don't know.
if anybody does have that, in all seriousness, if anybody has a YouTube channel like that, please leave that link in the private chat for me. Like, it's like, yeah, we're watching this guy. We're pretty sure he's like a Russian mob, maybe.
No, he's just a guy. Just that's it, Phil.
It's just a dude. Hey, Cider and Port, nice to see you. So yeah, Danny, I was gonna go over the Poggi one because there was some.
Let's
points.
do that.
He posted a new one. Tom's got a new one up with Lazarus, and he put this one up earlier today. So I thought it might be kind of interesting to kind of go through this one. It's not particularly long on this one. Tom has declared Lazarus the first T-shirt winner.
Right. So I mean, I went to Teespring and I created a T-shirt. It says it says Darth Dawkins put me on the troll list, and all I got for it was this lousy T-shirt. And my idea was that I would create these, and whoever made a good video or did well, I would send them a T-shirt for free. So this is the first person that I thought did pretty well.
And you did say that your criteria is whoever gets Darth to say some silly things, right?
Well, it just has to be kind of a good video, raise good objections. Maybe they really get Darth trigger. That's kind of funny too. Just kind of like they just make the cut, and it's
gotcha. There was one, I can't remember it. I'm pretty sure it's one of your videos, but one of the guys actually, he was pretty calm. I think he was either from the UK or Australia. And at one point, after back and forth, they get on this topic, and it's a question I've asked Darth too. He asked me, he's like, so wait, people can only know what's true? And there's a really long pause by Darth Dawkins standards anyway, a very long pause from him. And he goes, that's a good question. And I was surprised he said it. I was like, wow. Because I've heard other people asking that question before when they're talking about like epistemology and ontology and, knowing things for certain, revelation or revealed epistemology or whatever. And he'll just blow that question off. But this guy actually, I don't know why, but it landed. So anyway, I'll get this started. I'll speed it up a little bit till about 1.5. So, and then as usual, if you guys hear something you want to kind of make a comment, just give a holler. So.
Okay, so the first thing you should note probably is that when you walk into a room, right, the first thing Darth is going to say to you is, why is it that there's no God? Or why is atheism true? Or why are you an atheist, right?
Yep.
So Darth is going to immediately try and take the offensive. And now you're in the position where you're having to defend yourself. So the first thing that Lazarus does is he comes in and he poses a question. And so you can go ahead and play it.
Nice.
Hey, YouTube out there. Tom Rabbit likes to record these. Hey, Tom Rabbit.
I wanted to know what is the position of Darth on the problem of evil?
How do you know something is good or great in life?
I'm going to rewind that a little bit. I'm going to slow it down. His accent's just different enough. It's kind of throwing me off.
On the problem of evil.
How do you know something is good or great in life?
Because I find it good.
What made it good?
It depends on the situation. For example, because it brings me pleasure.
Yeah, so all you're simply talking about is good is just simply a psychic phenomenon in your head in reaction to external stimulus.
Yes.
So for you, goodness is simply just a mental.
Like that, no objection there. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's it.
Well, then
Look,
you're not talking about when we.
He doesn't even know what to say. He's just like, yeah, that's the position. Yeah. And then Darth's like, he's not expecting that, right?
Yeah.
He's like, well. Another thing that's noteworthy, something that Darth does all the time. This is very, very common with apologists. You'll hear Matt Slick will do the same thing, right? They'll do this thing where they add the word just, right? So for example, Matt Slick will be like, well, if you believe that, then what you're saying is just brain fizz or just molecules in motion. Now you have to ask yourself, what is the word just actually doing there, right? Because it doesn't really just seem any purpose except as like some kind of rhetorical tool. So imagine, like, instead of saying just molecules in motion, you're saying, oh, so what you're saying is that everything is molecules in motion. It's very, 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 very different, right? If I say just molecules, it's very dismissive, and there's no actual argument or anything in there. It's just basically hand waving. That's all it is.
Yeah. It's built to be. I wouldn't even say it's implicitly. It's fairly explicitly, minimizing. At the least. It's like, oh well, then it's that's all this is, and yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about something as being good or bad. Where in normal human language, we're referring to it being in some sense and in some shape objectively bad. So you're misusing language here, okay? So then nothing would be good or bad. It's just that you've had a sensory experience and a mental response, or a neurological state. So what?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What I meant
Posit
is
there.
how do
I think he's somewhat strawmanning Lazarus there. Notice that the guy believes that things are good, whether that be pleasure or whatever. He said it depends on the circumstance.
Yeah.
That's his position. Okay. And then what he does is when he reiterates his position, it just completely leaves out the fact that he does find things good. It's not like when he gave everything in those terms that therefore means, he's going to have to do a lot more work to suggest that therefore he's not licensed to say that pleasure is good or that rape is wrong or whatever. And that's the interesting part of the conversation there.
Right. You're right. So Lazarus lays out, this is what it means to be good. These things are good, whatever gives them pleasure, for example, in some cases. And the first thing Darth says is, so you don't think anything is good, right? But he just said
exactly
good,
right. That's disingenuous, right?
Yeah. Well, because and I think buried in that is that what Darth wants him to get. Well, nothing is actually good. Like for Darth, it good has to be determined by an outside arbiter, right? It's not enough for someone, if Lazarus is saying, no, I think it's good this way. I kind of wonder about this, because does Darth really have a defeater for that kind of I guess we'll find out with this guy, because he seems pretty confident in that. Yeah, no, that's
even if there were defeaters, right? Even if it were the defeaters, the point is that if it's a back and forth, the sort of, I think what I would do if I'm being authentic is like, look, okay, I see that you think X is good, but here's why X can't be good, and here's my argument. But that's not what Darth did here was rephrase or represented what Lazarus was saying, but omitting the fact that he finds anything good.
Yeah. All right, let's push on.
Christians make sense of evil with their definition of evil, like not with mine.
How do we make sense of it? Actually, it's a cakewalk. Evil is that which is a deviation or a rebellion from the character or purposes of God.
Okay, and why did God allow this to happen?
Why? Because it's to fulfill his ultimate purpose of creating a world of agents whom he can love, and they can love him back. But in order to get to that world, we have to go through this world first. That's
interesting. Like he says that. So this is kind of like that. What do they call it? The soul building theodicy, that you have to go.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like that. It's unclear exactly. It sounds like he's just spitballing.
Yeah, he doesn't seem to have a solid handle on it, because I mean, there's a lot to unpack with that. I can't remember the philosopher that kind of initially came up with that. I'm blanking on his name, but the whole idea behind it was that in order for you to kind of achieve the kind of love and it's not even really for God. You're kind of doing it because you need to build a certain amount of character through this life in order to really understand what it is to be faithful to God and to be loved by Him, right? Like you're going to be like forged, as opposed to just being created perfect.
Right.
And there's lots of different arguments for and against that theodicy, but when he just brings this up as if that's the case. The problem is that that Mr. Atheist guy, the video is getting kind of popular right now, and there's a couple of people mention it to me. I haven't watched it yet, but it's like, okay, well, you have this kind of free will to do things that are good that God wants you to do, and do things that are bad. So you have free will, and apparently you need to have free will in an existence of evil in order for you to become an agent. An agent that God will, appreciate or whatever in the end. But when you go to heaven, that goes away.
Yeah, well, they get into that. That's what's interesting. But
okay, all right.
It does sound like soul building. I would be hesitant to say that he's rendering the soul building theodicy because I just suspect if you asked Darth, says, "Do you mean soul building?" I just suspect he would just not affirm it or deny it, right?
Yeah, that would be. Yeah, I would suspect that too. Yeah.
And I want to give an aside that just kind of pertains to the notion of theodicy. I kind of thought about it, and I think there's a paradox here, right? That when someone points out, well, look, X shouldn't happen, and then the theist responds with a theodicy, what they're doing there is providing a reason for why that should have happened.
Yeah.
And so so what happens is that any theodicy you give for a particular event makes that event good. That's to say, it makes that event as an event that should happen,
but
right? Because that's what
do they? The thing that I think, like the person giving the theodicy, do they think it goes that far? Because I've heard them explain, like, well, I'm not saying that the thing should have happened. Maybe it shouldn't have happened that way. What I'm saying is God had a reason. Like they'll try to say that they don't have a dog in that fight. It's all up to God.
Well, that's the thing, right? The point is that if God had a reason to do it, it should happen, right? So so think about, like, let me just give like a real life example, right? Where let's say I do something really bizarre, like you witness me shoot someone, and you didn't know what was going on. In fact, on the face of it, it looks like I did something wrong. I killed someone. Okay. And then so you ask me, why did that happen? Right? Like, because it's suggesting that like something like that is not good. And so when I say, well, the guy, I knew he was about to pull out a gun and I just shot him first before. So it was an act of self-defense. And then what do? You're like, oh, that makes sense. You should. So and that's just to say that it was a good thing. It was the right thing to do to shoot the guy. And so what it does is completely absolves the event of me shooting the person in self-defense, my action is justified. It's good. And so that's the paradox of theodicy in general, is that it's like in the shooting case, that the second that you give a theodicy for whatever seems evil, if the theodicy goes through, if that's to say, if it's a good theodicy, then what you are questioning as evil is just not evil anymore.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. All right, let's push on.
Why couldn't he create directly the ideal final world?
Because then they would be robots and their final state would not be chosen. Are you an atheist?
Why would we be robots?
Are you an atheist?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Like, for example, God could create free agents that always do good. For example, like Jesus or the saints.
No, stop. No, you're quite mistaken. What you have just stated is an internal contradiction. It's self-contradictory. God cannot create an agent who cannot not behave or obey. That's a contradiction.
But I've heard this explained. The cannot not obey. The idea is that it's not about strictly being obedient. It's about making, if you have a variety of choices and all of those choices are either morally good or at worst morally neutral, you're making your own choice. You have free will to an extent, but there's nothing on the menu that's going to create a problem.
Darth did something really interesting here. It actually was cleverly dishonest. Very, very cleverly dishonest, right? Notice that he used the notion of obey and avoided the word good. Why would he do that? Now, I think there's actually a reason for why Darth did this. He chose to use the word or talk in terms of obedience rather than right and wrong because he knows that God has free will, but he only does the good. So if he said that, this is very clever on Darth's part, but if you see through it, it's a way of preventing an objection and just talking about obedience rather than in terms of morality, because those concepts are going to be distinct to most people, right? And I think that has other philosophical interesting implications. But what I would have asked in this case, and it would have been, it may have not worked, but I'll tell you what I would have done. I would have asked him, okay, do you think obedience to God is moral? Do you think it's good? And then if he says no, well, that looks really bad. If he says yes, then you're saying that God can't create a creature that always does the good. Well, why? Because God is at least an agent, although not created, that only does the good. You see, that's how I would have turned the conversation. But it's just very, very cleverly dishonest for him to switch from using the terms right and wrong, moral and immoral, good and bad, to notions of obedience. I don't know if anyone perceives that.
Yeah, no, that is an interesting point because the other thing too is, I mean, he's opening himself up that way, definitely. I would kind of wonder. It would be interesting to hear somebody ask him that question, like, so because he's saying God couldn't make an agent that couldn't not obey, right?
Because God doesn't obey anyone. You see, this is why it's clever on Darth's part.
Right. Yeah.
So obedience doesn't really apply to God, but it applies to creatures that he's created.
Right.
Okay. So, but that's not the point. The point is that why is he talking about obedience to God? Because Darth thinks that obedience to God is the good thing, right? It's the only morally good thing.
Right.
So do you guys think that do you think he's being clever, or do you think this is just something kind of internalized?
No, he's being clever. I think he deliberately used the word obedience to avoid this sort of objection, but that's my intuition.
Well, he says something later on that might conflict with that. And because he starts speaking about God's free will, and he says some things that really raised my eyebrow. But
what?
I'll just have to wait for it. But I think what he does is he changes it, because the question posed is, what's the contradiction with someone who has free will? It's stipulated that the person has free will, and that of their own free will, they just happen to always choose the good. And Darth changed that to basically a scenario where they don't have free will. They're just a robot. But that's not what he was asked. So he's not even addressing what was asked him by Lazarus.
Yep.
That's like saying God could make a gold square triangle. That's a contradiction in terms.
And I'm not sure how he's getting that. That seems kind of odd to me, that creating an agent without the capacity to disobey is somehow the same thing as like making a round circle or something, or excuse me, a square circle or something like that. He'd have to. No,
they could disobey. They could disobey. They just never choose to. Through their own free will, they're just not inclined to do so.
Right.
Yeah, there's a difference between like always and necessary. So, for instance, Michael Jordan might always score all his 3-pointers, right, in some situation, but it doesn't mean that he could have not missed, right? So that's what he's but I think that's what Darth is trying to do, is that you could say something like, X person always does X, but he could have not done X.
There's no contradiction there that I see. We already know it's true. In heaven, there's no sin, right?
Yeah. So
we have free will in heaven. We just choose not to. Right?
Yeah, but that's the trick, right? Like, I mean, I'm sure Darth Dawkins would probably say we'll have free will in heaven, but it doesn't entirely, like, And for somebody like Lazarus, it's like, okay, well, if you get to that point, if we're in heaven, we have free will, but we will only do the good. We only choose good things. Seemingly, we have free will, but it seems like here on Earth, in order for us to demonstrate our free will, we have to be able to, have the capacity to do evil things.
Yeah, I think that what you're saying, Jefferson, is that this sort of move doesn't help him.
No.
Yeah, because okay, the bullet that he bites here, in fact, if anything, it's worse for him because he's conceding that you could sin in heaven, you just don't. So
Right.
he still is going to have to accept the proposition that I can sin in heaven. But then he might bite that bullet. But what does this do for him? The point is that God still the objection goes through. God could still make the earth in which you could sin, but you never do.
Yeah, because it's either going to be one of two choices. If you get to that point, it's like either you lack the capacity to sin, which means you're more like the robot Darth is objecting to, or you just never will sin. You still have free will, but for some reason or whatever, you as an agent will never do it. Yeah, that to me, that doesn't make sense. It seems like he's kind of walking into two different sets of problems.
Okay, but I thought that God was a free agent that always do good.
Okay. Well, I don't argue for a generic God. I argue for the Christian God. God is everything that we
This is
conceive
hilarious,
of that
by the way.
basically that we know of.
What's that?
That's hilarious because if you've watched any of my videos, Darth almost never argues for a Christian God unless he is supremely pressed on it. And
Yeah,
in
he's
fact,
actually he's been pushing against that with a lot of the people he's been talking
right.
to.
In fact, he tries to present what he calls a minimalist God, right? Which is just that something like he's a mind, and he's ultimately fundamental and whatever eternal or something like that, and that applies to could fit many God concepts, right? So it's just hilarious that the only reason he's doing this is because it's to his advantage to appeal to a more specific God in this situation.
I think that you were talking about this the other night, Tom. The idea is that this is interesting to some degree, that Christians think that God is necessarily triune, meaning that God necessarily entails Jesus or something like that. But then, so what that means, if Jesus is essential, or the Trinity is essential to the God concept, that means that if there's such a concept that doesn't have the property of being Trinity, it's not God, right?
Right.
So, but what I think Stephen Law points out very well is that what's easier to defend, a triune God or a God that's just simply disembodied, right? If I just define God as disembodied, and I assert that can ground all of existence and all that gibberish, right? That's much harder to approach than if you were to say there's this triune thing with three persons that grounds all of existence, right? Then you could talk, so I think, I'm totally right there with you, Tom.
And I think Stephen Law, I mean, he said it in his video too, because he was like, the God that I'm usually discussing with people is one that's praiseworthy. Like it's one that a human being is willing to worship. There's a richer God that's kind of fleshed out for them. It's not this kind of like very thin, minimalist, definition of just, whatever. He seemed to kind of push back on that like right away.
Yeah, I'll just say this to everyone watching, right? So if Darth tries to use this on you, right, and he says, I'm not presenting any, all I said was that we're just talking about a minimalist God, right? Well, here's what you ought to say, right? And I talked to Danny about this, is that you should just outright say, oh, I thought you thought that God was omnibenevolent, always truth-telling, triune, blah 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 blah, right? There's a plethora of properties, right? And to Darth, all of those properties are necessary. Means that if he's lacking one of those, it's not God. It's not his God.
Be careful if you call them properties, though. He'll push back. He's like, no, those aren't properties; they're facets.
Does he really say that?
It doesn't matter.
He said it before because he was trying to dodge somebody in an argument he was having about a simple God versus a complex one.
Yeah, I don't
But-
see the distinction between like a necessary facet and a necessary property. Like, so it doesn't really matter.
I didn't either, but he tried to make one, and it was kind of tortured.
So immediately Darth's going to have to answer, no, those are necessary, right? And so then you would reply with something like, well, I don't understand then, because what I take it to be a minimalist concept is that you're only including the necessary properties. But if you're saying that all these other properties, like always truth-telling, omnibenevolent, blah, 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 if you're saying those aren't necessary, then how is what you said a minimalist concept?
And it
right?
always it seems to me that one of those other properties or facets pops up later, right? Like he starts with kind of the minimal one, like how do you ground reality? And then if somebody like this Lazarus guy starts asking these kinds of questions that start to get into, I think, kind of some general theological issues, then he'll insert a new he'll bring up a property he thinks applies to God in order to kind of counter it,
Right.
while not acknowledging, like, he wants to acknowledge, like, no, I'm not even talking about the Christian God. The interesting thing about this has been debated before, like if you were to use things like the Kalam cosmological argument or any of these other kinds of things, even if that's convincing up to the point of getting to a God, you still have to make the connection to like the God of Christianity as opposed to, say, the God of Islam. And I don't think I've ever seen Darth Dawkins attempt to bridge that gap, other than to just assert it.
Yeah, but it's funny, like, there's all these, like, Darth is fairly inconsistent with respect to this, that, like, he attacks fellow Christians about their evidentialism,
Yes.
right? That's to say, all the time, right? Like, if an evidentialist Christian comes up and says, well, why can't I give the Kalam or something like that? Then Darth is going to say, well, it's ultimately unbiblical to give an argument for God, or for God rather to be the conclusion. But then suddenly, like, there are certain topics that Darth lets go of that. For instance, if he talks to a Muslim, he just can't help but talk about the contradictoriness of the Quran and point that as evidence that, like, Christianity is more likely true. Like, and there are other cases, I bet, that I can't really recall, but he'll drop the whole notion of, like, precept all the way when it comes to particular views that he's annoyed with,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Reflects and has its origin in God, who exemplifies goodness to its fullest.
Mhm.
But you see, in an atheist world, okay, whatever you think is goodness is just simply a spontaneous mental event in your world of chance, where there is no final, foundational, or ultimate rhyme or reason why anything happens at all.
There's
You
that
have
word
no
again.
God,
Just
you have no absolute.
Wait, please pause it here. There's like a grave mistake. And I, once again, like, I'm going to say this is clever on behalf of most Christians. It's cleverly, but here's the thing, guys. Everyone should understand this, that atheism does not entail naturalism. It just doesn't, right? At best, what Darth can do at best is show why there's a problem with naturalism at best. But if there's a problem with naturalism, let's say, right, that doesn't mean that atheism is in trouble, right? There are most philosophers are atheists, and less than 50% of philosophers identify as naturalists. The rest are either non-naturalists or totter, or don't take a position, right? So that's just to say there are tons of professional philosophers, right, that don't take a position on naturalism, or they're just not a naturalist. They reject it. And so that's just to say that if you could point out every single darn problem about naturalism, it won't ever get you to, therefore, theism, right? And it's, I think that if you think about what the atheism, I'm going to use, I know from my lactheist, I'm going to accommodate you. Let's just take my hard atheist, right? The people that reject God's existence. There's actually not that much that follows from that. All it tells you about the world is there's not this disembodied mind with some omni properties, right? That's all it tells you. It doesn't tell you whether numbers exist, whether morality exists, whether there's, atoms or not atoms, or whether things, where you have a brain. It doesn't tell you anything about that, right? So what Darth Dawkins and other apologists have conveniently done for themselves is shift the topic when most people don't even notice from a debate about naturalism, when the debate is originally about atheism, right?
Yeah.
And it's just constant, right? It's absolutely constant. I mean, to be honest, when I was a theist, I would do this, right? It was just naturalism was for me an easy punching bag, but it just I finally had to like learn that like, oh well, even if I could prove naturalism to be false, I'm not going to get to Christianity, and I'm not going to get to atheism.
Yeah, well, to put it another way, let's just look at it like this. Jack Angstreich is Darth's foil, and Jack is at the top tier of reprobate atheists, and Jack is not a naturalist.
Right.
So there you go.
Absolute to appeal to as to why anything it is what it all is at all. But if you then disagree and you simply say, oh, no, things are what they are because of laws of nature, good, then I want to know, are laws of nature absolute, eternal? Okay. Did they begin to exist? Because if
and this is more of Darth kind of, I think this is also kind of clever because this is the one thing I think a lot of people don't get, because if he starts off with one of his questions, usually the idea is he wants you to choose. He did this in the last few videos that I saw. He'll ask a person about, I can't remember who the user was, but he said something like, okay, do you believe that whatever's foundational is personal, right? And the guy was like, no, he didn't believe in something foundational. So then Darth then jumps to, oh, so you believe by default that whatever is foundational is impersonal, without ever setting this person up into that, like without even really clarifying it. He just sort of like kind of bum rushed him with it and then kind of pushed him along. This idea that Darth is kind of like, okay, well, you as an atheist only accept natural laws and stuff. Now you need to show me how they have the same properties as my God in order to fill this foundational absolute thing that I use to justify my worldview. I need you to demonstrate how those things have those same properties to justify your worldview. It's to me, it's a strange setup. Maybe I'm not being accurate.
I also think, I mean, I haven't seen the rest of the clip, but like I think this might be a case where he's just being inconsistent in terms of whether using precept or evidentialism, but I'm not so sure.
Yeah, this is where I think, because there's parts in his arguments where he kind of like he's sort of like kind of defining God into existence in the way that some ontological arguments for God do, but at the same time he kind of rhetorically resorts to a lot of word usage that shows up in presuppositional apologetics. So sometimes I think and I think he's just been kind of like collecting this stuff, over the more than a decade that he's been on YouTube, kind of screaming at people. So
if they did, then they're not absolute in and of themselves, and they cannot explain themselves, can they? And you wouldn't even know that they are laws of nature, because in order for them to be actual laws of nature, there must be something fundamental, absolute, that is imposing and securing the regularity, as opposed to the appearance.
And that's where things get trickier too, because it goes from, how is that thing like the God that I'm telling you is the foundation for everything? Now you have to explain to me where those things came from, and they better have come from something that has the same properties I'm telling you are necessary for things to work.
Yeah, or I just take a lot of people just reject the notion of there being something that that grounds reality. I mean, that's kind of like the camp. But so you have an option, right? Other than affirming what Darth is saying, is that you could say that there's some thing that grounds existence or grounds reality. It's just not God. And then you've made a claim, and then you might, that might be a difficult claim to support, let's say. But there's also just asking Darth, look, I think the grounding notion of like to ground reality doesn't really make sense to me. It seems like you could just have the set of all facts and nothing that grounds them. So I don't see why I should accept that that there should be a grounding of facts. I mean, that's the kind of strategy I go. I don't really want to. I mean, even if I found the notion of grounding coherent, I'm not gonna I'm not going to be able to support a claim like that. All the set of facts in the world are like grounded in X or something. I'm not going to be able to support that.
And I noticed in a conversation that he had with, it wasn't the Poji one, it was somebody else. He was trying to get into a conversation about like infinite events or something like that. And he gave this really weird example, and it was almost if I'd spun it up, if I could find it, I'd do it, but I don't want to waste time trying to dig it out again. I'm not sure where it's at. But he seems to give this kind of explanation where, like, he wants to disagree with the notion that you could have an infinite series of events. But when he starts talking to this skeptic about it, it's deeper than that. And I don't know if he makes the connection. Like, he's skeptical of every single event. No single event can occur without his God. So the idea that he rejects to like an infinite series of it, it's like, well, it just sort of follows, man. Like, of course you don't think that there's going to be a set of causal events or whatever without God, but you don't think that, like, it for him, it's almost like every moment is a miracle. Everything has to be grounded in this God. The odd thing about that, though, I think it lends itself to some strange things, because he's talking about, well, in order for regularity to be the case, there has to be something that imposes it. His notion of how he's making these connections is based on epistemology and knowledge revealed to him by God, and part of that is special revelation through the Bible. But that contains stories in which regularity breaks down. Jesus walks on unfrozen water.
Yeah, that's a whole mess that he's in there. Like, that's like where Darth is weakest. If you can get him to that point where he's answering the question, like, how do you know that God exists? And then he says, because he revealed himself. I mean, there's just a slew of issues there. And Darth will, I've noticed that Darth will only say that to certain people. And I think he's only going to say it to people that are not likely to call him out on the fact that it's just question begging to say God exists in virtue of God revealing himself to me, right? So he's very, very tactful in terms of who he tells his so-called justification for the existence of God.
Yeah, I was going to say, I've only heard him actually say it, and oftentimes when he'll say it, well, because it was revealed to me, and then he'll just immediately pivot and go on to another question.
Now,
tell
me about your atheism.
He has to move from that really fast, or else he'll be called out on it by certain people.
Yeah.
Otherwise, and like I said, I really stand by this. He's picky, choosy about who he says dumb things to, right? He's like, okay, I know this doesn't. I mean, I'm not so sure. I don't mean to psychologize all the way, but like the point is that I think he's aware that he's susceptible in that moment, and so he has to move on from it really fast.
Yeah.
And the key to defeating Darth is not letting him move on. Right? You be like, no. That what you just said was question begging. Get ready to be, get ready to like. It's like what is the Okay, I've learned in history class. Maybe this is wrong, but then someone else can tell me. But a defensive war is kind of hopeless, right? More or at least less likely. You're less likely to win if you're just defending yourself, right? That you have to attack, right? In some cases, and just kind of turtling, and you're just more likely to lose the battle or the war, right? Now, I mean, maybe that historical fact is not right, but it's certainly true in the case of Darth, right? If you're just sitting there turtling, you could still like overcome Darth, right? But it's just, you're more likely to do what Lazarus seems to be doing, asking questions and pushing him on what he's saying. Otherwise, you're going to be in that turtle and you're being sieged, and you might get caught in a conundrum, right? But that's my view, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Of regularity. So your atheistic position is ultimately doomed to incoherence. The only way for you to be a coherent human being is to come to believe in God, but not any God, but the God of the Bible. Why? Because the God of the Bible is the only God in human history that has the necessary and sufficient attributes so that human beings can have intelligibility.
That's just, I don't know how I could ever.
That goes back to what we were saying, right? About the triuneness and all that stuff, right? It seems like the way he defines God the watered down minimalistic version fits like, the Islamic.
It's like, you started off with Yahweh, but now it's like, now the triune God, now with more attributes, like, ooh, shiny. This is a weird, because now he has kind of left that, like, no, I'm not talking about the Christian God. We're just talking about the minimal fact, the minimal God. This is necessary to get reality up and running. And now it's like, nope, it's got to be this one. Can't be any of those other ones.
Okay. Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Is God an agent?
Yes.
Is he free?
About free about what?
Does he have free will?
Does he have what?
Free will.
I didn't understand you again.
Does God have free will?
For some things.
Okay, and
There you go, Timmy.
For some things.
I heard that and I was like, what?
Yeah, he doesn't want to say that he has the will, he has the freedom to sin or freedom to lie or something like that.
Okay.
That he's trying to dodge that bullet, it seems like. But I think you could the whole free will thing, like this could inspire a whole discussion about like what it means to say God is free, given that he can't lying is like a no go.
Yeah.
But some apologists like to distinguish freedom of will and freedom of choice. But let's just continue watching the video and see if anything like this pops up.
does God always act good, morally speaking?
God always behaves in a way that is not. Hold on a second. I got something I might do.
I mean, why isn't it so important for you to understand God in this way, Bud?
I'm just.
It just seems like you're trying to find a contradiction in someone else's argument when you ask questions.
This is hilarious
like that.
because that's what Darth does.
Right. Yeah. This like, why are you doing this? Like, wait, your hero does this every day, sometimes all day, every day.
Is that Bart guy?
Yeah.
That
Oh, that guy's insane. I don't know why. He should just be perma-muted.
Is that a Decepticon logo inside the Cobra Commander icon? The Cobra icon? Like that's G.I. Joe
If
and
that's
Transformers.
true,
Isn't it?
if that's true, that would explain a lot.
Yeah. It's the cult of Cobra. He should stay away from that stuff. A lot of pagan imagery in G.I. Joe. Lots of pagan imagery.
I mean, you should ask yourself those questions, right?
Oh,
All right, I'm back.
Like fishing for an inconsistent. It just seems like you're fishing for like some sort of.
Yeah. Having questions about God that are unanswered doesn't get you to know God. And by the way, how is it that there is no God?
Before I answer that, can you just tell me if God always acts good, morally speaking?
There you go. So Darth stepped away and he said he came back, tried to just kind of wrap up some kind of makeshift response.
Yep.
And then immediately shift
Back
to
to
the offensive, right?
Back to square one.
and all Lazarus did was like, yeah, hold on a second. Can you just answer the question? It's all he did. And just watch what happens.
Does God always act good? Well, it depends on how you define good.
Good.
God always
good defined under the Christian worldview.
Perfect answer.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah.
This is really annoying when people do this, right? Or especially like people that are giving the moral argument for God, is that here's the deal, guys. All Christians are gonna have a concept of rightness or wrongness or good and bad. So anytime that you're using the term right and wrong, good or bad to do an internal critique of their view, right? The question for them to ask, well, they can't ask you their question about, well, what do you mean by right or wrong, or what do you mean by moral and immoral, is just irrelevant, right? Because you're just using their concepts, And Lazarus answered perfectly, right? It's whatever it means on the Christian worldview.
Right. Yeah, because that's the standard that the standard that we're dealing with. So
Okay, so you agree that it's not logically impossible that an agent can be free and always do good?
Why not?
What? Repeat the question.
Do you agree that it's logically possible that an agent is free and always do good?
Only for God.
Okay.
So let's see how he gets out of special pleading here.
Yep. Sorry.
Well, what does it mean to be logically possible only for God?
Because only in a world, God is the only one who can always be good and cannot rebel. Any other agent that God creates could have the capacity in the original way that God created them. Now, when
I want to pause it right there because he brought up something that is a category error. A creator, Darth is always harping about the creator-creature distinction. A creator can't rebel.
Right, which is it goes back to our conversation earlier in the stream about obedience, right? He's shifting, rather he says, notice what he's done. He did not say always does the good and can't do evil. He said God always does the good and can't rebel.
Yeah.
You know, once again, it's a clever way of being dishonest.
Jesus Christ died on the cross and he brought redemption, he will permanentize their seeking God to free them from their sin eternally. So the good state that believers are in for eternity, where we cannot sin, is simply God permanentizing our desire never to rebel again.
I think this is interesting. I don't want to belabor this too much, but I think it's interesting how quickly Lazarus has gotten Darth to shift from doing his usual kind of metaphysic routine right on into theological assertions. He's making a lot of theological claims. Most of this isn't really. I mean, I don't really see Darth get this far with people.
Right, and it's all just because basically had some. I mean, these are basic objections, like problem of evil, right? Problem of free will, some of these basic objections.
Right.
Just that he's presenting them, and he's not getting sidetracked by the little booby traps. You know, like what do you mean by good? He just like Danny said, he answers correctly, and then he's you know the ball's back in Darth's court. He has to answer these things. Now, what he just said there, I don't even understand. It just sounds like gibberish. I mean, a permanentizing.
I didn't understand any of it. I think that I learned something the other day, a phrase, and I hope I don't butcher it, but there's something called intellectual gatekeeping, right? And this is a funny way of saying that, using big words so people to obfuscate the objection that's been given or the conversation, right? And what did he use? Permanentize? I have no, what the hell? Like, it's for, let's see how he does. I haven't seen the video.
Look, if a similar word was used against Darth, he would accuse them of philosophy-speak, right?
And gobbledygook.
And using big words, right? But whatever.
Yeah, you explain it to me like I'm 5. Yeah, but I think whether it's gatekeeping, in a way, it's sort of like he's kind of he would object to it, but it's like he's basically stacking on top of an already really tall summit in the hopes that you'll look at them. Oh, okay, well that sounds difficult. I don't want to go there, so that they'll veer back off and maybe say something that'll get him into trouble. This Lazarus dude is not. He's pretty sharp. He's not
making mistakes.
Yeah, he's just kind of sticking to, and he's keeping it simple, which is good. He's keeping it relatively simple, and he seems to be keeping it honest. So,
okay. So, can you explain what is the reason exactly why it didn't create free agent that always do good?
Because that's a logical contradiction.
What is the contradiction?
To create a free agent who cannot not rebel.
There it is again.
There it is
How
again.
is that a contradiction?
Yeah.
Okay. If somebody is an agent, it means they can choose otherwise. If God creates an agent who has freedom to choose otherwise, if they can't choose otherwise, then they're not a free agent.
I would like, is that a problem?
Well, I think Darth is right here, but it just doesn't help him in this case. Here's why. Because the idea is that not all of our when we make a choice, sometimes all of the options are all good. So if I'm deciding between pizza, spaghetti, and I don't know, a sandwich, okay, and I choose pizza, I could have chosen to eat the sandwich, okay, and if I had, it wouldn't be evil, okay. So the idea that I think this is interesting to me, the idea of only being able to choose the good is just, while retaining free will, it's just to say that all of your options do not have the property of being evil, right? But you have options, and you could choose between them. If you choose one, you could have chosen the other. So it does not help him here.
Yeah.
Right?
Correct.
Because to say that I could only choose the good doesn't imply that there's only one option of goodness.
Yeah. It's odd to me that he kind of, like, for the purposes of these arguments, he kind of sets it up as like it's always going to be a binary choice, good versus bad, in order to kind of set this up. I find it, but the other thing I think is kind of weird too is like Lazarus asks him about like being an agent or having agency, and I think that's why Dawkins is trying to stick with that word, right? Because if by his definition, if you can't, if you're a human being created by God with the agency to choose good and evil, to make these kinds of free will decisions, if you don't have agency, you're not an agent, and you're just some kind of robot.
Yeah, the distinction, I mean, there's a long history of like the distinction between agency and non-agency, but I think one of the things that I'm not suggesting that anyone believe it, but I'll tell you that one of the motivations for making that distinction, like having a separate category for agency, some people think that animals have a point of view and they have minds, but they're not agents. So
yeah, but he also says that we can't not rebel, which means that we must rebel, which means that we couldn't have done otherwise but to rebel, which means that we don't have free will.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. Yeah, like the idea is that if we are destined if it's necessary that we rebel, that means there's going to be at least one, on Darth's view, choice in which I could have not done otherwise, right?
Yeah.
On his view.
Yeah, and it seems like that. I mean, I hate to say it, but theologically, I think I know he's not a Calvinist in the sense where he believes in that kind of. It would be interesting to see Darth Dawkins have a conversation with sort of like a 5-point Calvinist. If he has in the past, I don't think I've ever.
He has,
it,
yeah, he has.
Oh, okay.
It just devolves into bickering about scripture, and the last time I heard him talking to Matt Slick just exited because he was getting confrontational.
I think I saw a guy who might classify himself as a 5-point Calvinist correct Darth on getting angry at quote unquote the sinners, because as a Calvinist he doesn't believe that people choose salvation per se. They have to be regenerated by the Holy Spirit. And so the notion that Darth is getting angry at these non-believers that's not Christian. And Darth was like trying to come come across the lane at him like he was not handling the correction well. But then again, I think that's a huge theological divide between him and that guy. So he wouldn't accept it.
What you're talking about is a square triangle, sir.
I mean, there is some way around this because God is a kind of agent that is free and always do good.
Yeah, but you're making a category error. God has an immutable, eternal nature. He simply necessarily exists. All other agents are derivative and contingent. When God creates them, if God created,
can we pause there before you? I'm anticipating. I'm going to pause there because that might be something I can work with. I'm scared that what follows is just gibberish. But first of all, when he says no, the whole idea there, if you take an agent, a necessary being, a necessary agent, and a contingent agent, right? He's pointing this out as a property of God that makes it such that he's not special pleading.
Right.
Okay. But the thing is that now he has to provide the argument for why that property of necessity makes it possible in his view that God has freedom and can't rebel and only do the good. And I don't anticipate anything intelligible there, because I don't think the property of necessity could ever get you out of this special pleading scenario.
And that's the thing. Like, I kind of raised an eyebrow when he said that, because he's talking about it's a necessarily existing being in the sense that the idea that God has this kind of necessity, and then everything else is just derivative or contingent. I kind of wonder, like, how has he concluded that if God's this necessary being, all the things that are derivative and contingent upon him don't exist necessarily as well, right?
He has to tie in that specific quality as to why it's a legitimate exception, right? And he could say, like, well, it doesn't apply to Jesus because he had a beard, right? I mean, that doesn't tell you why the property of beard having makes you exempt from this, right?
Yeah, if anyone heard that say, "Oh, well, Jesus has a beard," the proper response is, "So what?" So in the same way that if he's saying, "Look, God's necessary," well, so what?
Right.
Yeah,
I guess I mean, because it seems to me that somebody could take that and run with it and say, well, if the God's necessary and he creates stuff, he couldn't have done otherwise. So everything that exists because it was necessary for this necessary being to do that. Right? Like, I mean, that might not be a great way to argue it, but they could end up can't that get you into what do they call it? Necessitarianism? God could not have created the.
There's something there, Jefferson, and that could lead us to a sort of tangential conversation. But it is interesting. Yeah, I think what you're saying is that the idea of a contingent thing being explained by a necessary thing seems contradictory. And I think I agree with you, right? If a contingent fact is explained by a necessary fact, it just makes the contingent fact necessary as well.
At least to a certain. Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Well, to an extent, it's like you have this necessary being, right? It must be the case. We've got this stuff. So Darth seems to be doing this kind of thing where he gets a God of necessity by inferring it from contingent things, because he's skeptical, right? There's all this stuff and there's facts, but there must be something ultimate that undergirds all of this. So so they must be contingent. They rely on something, and it can't just go back infinitely, because he's not going to accept that. So you have this being that necessarily exists. Okay, fine. Well, if that's the case, then to some degree of like, this God is orderly, smart, and then that's why we have an orderly reality. Okay, well, if some of those properties of this ultimate being are leaking out, then to a certain extent, if everything depends on this thing, it sounds like they were inevitable. Like this necessary being couldn't have done anything other than create the reality that we see around him. And so that does kind of like undermine the contingency basis of those facts.
Yeah, you might have something there.
Okay. But yeah, let's not chase that go down that hole. So, all right, here we go.
Who could not rebel, then they wouldn't be an agent.
Or at least not in a meaningful sense. They might be able to choose.
Not.
I'm not sure.
Well, yeah, but that's not. Yeah, but I agree with you, B3. But that's not the category of agency that we're discussing.
Yeah, moral agency.
Yeah. So you're what you've committed is a contradiction here. What you're asking is, why can't God create a rock so big that he can't lift it? Why can't God make a gold?
Our proven installation process ensures your gutters are in tip-top shape and prepped to protect your home.
Ad block.
Step 1.
Plated square triangle, because they don't. It doesn't mean anything. It's a contradiction in terms.
He's just restating. Like he said this. Like, how many times has he said this? Right. He's just asserted it's a contradiction. It's a contradiction. Square triangles, contradiction. Like, I think. Okay. Well.
Right, but Lazarus responds how you should respond.
Coming up here.
Yeah. It's really simple too.
The contradiction.
There you go.
Can God create an agent who will be unable to rebel? Well, agency includes the possibility of rebelling. So then if he can't rebel, then he's not an agent, a moral agent with respect to God.
Oh, so you mean the contradiction would be the agent could rebel and the agent couldn't rebel?
Agency, in the category that we're discussing, is the ability to obey or disobey God. if you
See, that's a definition I'm not. Yeah, that seems shaky to me.
What do you say?
if you say he
I didn't hear it.
Agency is defined as the ability to obey or disobey.
Oh well, then does God obey and disobey? I mean, I don't know. We'll
Yeah,
continue.
that just seems
Yeah, you're
it's
right.
like okay,
I
yeah,
see
then
what you're saying.
yeah, God can't be an agent by that definition. So
he could create an agent who could not rebel, then they're simply just a moral robot. Then they would cease to be the kind of agent that you're thinking of.
There's that word again. Just.
Okay, it's
yep.
strikes me a bit weird because, like, I don't think of God in terms of a robot. Nor do I think do you believe in saints? Do you believe in saints?
No, when I in the New Testament, all Christians are saints.
Okay, so you believe in them.
Yes.
And those people never sinned in their life, I think.
No, you don't know what you're talking about.
No, I ask you.
Saints in the Bible, saints are only are people who became Christians. You have a notion of sainthood that is a false teaching among certain denominations.
Okay.
I think Darth wants to say Catholic there, but he's not gonna. So.
Okay, maybe it's only under Catholic denominations that.
Yeah, that's not taught in the Bible, sir.
No, I think there's
by
a
the
little
way,
bit of...
and by the way, even within Catholicism, sainthood is not people who have never sinned. Sainthood in Catholicism who have reached a special level of purification and holiness.
Yeah, for example, I think that in Catholicism they think the Virgin Mary never sinned. Do you believe that?
Well, no.
Okay.
But even the Catholics who do believe that, they didn't think she was incapable. They just say she was essentially preserved by God. So even there, you're not going to get what you're looking for here.
Yeah, but we're getting off the main subject here, okay? Which is atheism and theism.
I thought that guy's comment was kind of interesting. Even there, you're not going to get what you were looking for. Is he sure he knows what Lazarus is looking for? Like, he just kind of like, yeah, you're not getting anywhere that way. You won't win against Darth.
Yeah, that person I think got banned this morning. So
who was it? Sheldor?
B3.
Okay.
Yeah, B3
got banned. Like, what'd they do?
Interrupting, over talking.
Oh, yeah, the cardinal sins.
Like that.
Okay.
So, how did you determine that there is no God, Lazarus?
Oh, I think that the existence of evil is very likely incompatible with the existence of an omni-God.
Okay. So, how do you define evil?
Evil, like it's defined under the Christian worldview. So whatever is against God will.
Okay. So God cannot temporarily coexist with an instance of evil?
With some instance, I think, yeah, but not with every instance.
Why not?
Oh, because I think that he could stop this evil if he was real.
Okay, but again, you're moving the goalposts here, okay? You're saying evil is incompatible with God, but now you're talking about the Christian God. Atheism is not
yeah, this is evil is incompatible with God, but now you're. How did he put that again? Is he trying to want?
I'm not so sure, but I'm wondering now. I'm confused. So we changed topics to problem of evil versus like whether God has free will. I think he could have pressed, or I think it would have been good to continue the whole God, freedom, evil, could do evil stuff. But
yeah,
let's see where this gets it.
If he was real.
Okay, but again, you're moving the goalposts here, okay? You're saying evil is incompatible with God, but now you're talking about the Christian God. Atheism Atheism is not the disbelief in the Christian God. Atheism is the disbelief and denial of all gods. Okay?
Which implies the disbelief of the Christian God.
Right. I don't understand why he says this a lot.
Why did you say that? Does anybody know?
He tried saying this to me once, and I actually had to back him up off it. Because he kept saying, oh, so you deny God concepts. I'm like, I don't deny a single God concept. I deny them in actuality. Like, I can entertain them as concepts. I don't think
because that's hard to defend, right? It's almost impossible to defend.
Yeah, it's like I'm not gonna. Yeah, it's like that's kind of crazy.
It's just silly because look, JJ is a pantheist. He believes in God, but what JJ means by God is literally the universe.
Yeah.
So if this were true, right, then as an atheist, I deny the existence of the universe, right? It's just, it doesn't make any real sense to talk about these things just with respect to any concept. I mean, the concepts vary so much that we just kind of cluster them together into this sort of colloquial God likeness.
Yeah, and it seems weird to me that when he does this kind of the Darth Dawkins dodge kind of thing, like, no, I want you to falsify not just my God but every God. Like, as an atheist, this is what's required from you. You have to reject every God. Well, it's odds are Lazarus does, right? But that's not
all concepts though, because there are
no.
If I ask Lazarus right now, are there some concepts of God you don't even know of, right?
Yeah, sure, right.
Yes, right?
Yeah. But the notion that, like, you know, if they're like, oh, do you think any of them are real? Lazarus would probably say, you know, did they actually be real? Like, exist in reality? No, probably not. Right. But there's other concepts I wouldn't be aware of, like you said. But then, yeah, this idea that, you know, he was comfortable making those theological assertions and sticking with kind of the Christian God. And now it seems like he's starting to, like, kind of reverse course on that. He wants to get back to his, like, minimally defined God that he usually uses.
When we define God,
he already just admitted the compatibility.
Okay, so we're on the same page. God is that which is eternal, absolute, ultimate, and the source of all possibility, and is a mind. Do you?
Now he's back to the generic God,
definition?
right?
Yep.
Remember, just in this very video, he's already said, "I don't argue for a generic God. I argue for the Christian God." Now he's back to the generic God.
Yep.
Why? Because he's trying to force a very, very heavy burden upon Lazarus to somehow prove that it's incoherent with respect to any God concept. All gods, just like Simplicator.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
It's uncontroversial. It's an uncontroversial definition.
Can I tell you? I
pause it right there. Pause it right there.
Go ahead.
Most Christians, or even most Christian philosophers and apologists, if you were to tell them what does it mean to say there's a source of possibility, they would be very confused. It's that vague. That's not even, that's, in a sense, it's not controversial. It's vague. It's like no one knows what you're talking about for the most part. So you know, this is. So in a sense, what he's saying is it's totally false, right? This is a contentious definition of God.
Yeah, because those terms. I mean, like, you know, what does he mean by source? What does he mean by possibility? What you know? And he doesn't seem to tolerate anybody insisting. I don't know that people really get to insist that much, but when they ask him to kind of like flesh that out, I've never heard him flesh it out, and I've been watching some of these videos for quite a while.
Yeah, I don't know. I personally don't accept the coherency of a source of possibility. Most people don't know what that means. I don't know what it means. So that's not going to be, if there is such a God concept, if there is a God concept, it's not going to involve that for me and most people, right? So it's just not true that it's uncontroversial.
Yeah. Yep. I see a tangent. Time Rabbit. I'm going to show that one. From a tangent, Time Rabbit, he will also not debate you anymore. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what's up with that. I mean, just like, I was like, dude, let's just do the modern day debate thing, and he refuses to.
Weren't you guys were offering like money to get him to debate Jack Engstrike, right?
Well, that's true, but like, it's important because those oftentimes get mixed up as like some kind of singular offer. But yeah, I have an offer that I will debate Darth Dawkins on Modern Day Debate, and there's reasons why I want to do it there. One, obviously he doesn't have mod and mute powers. Two, it's going to be public, which I like.
Yep.
It's going to be sort of the biggest sort of venue possible, right? And 3, he won't look when you get into a modern day debate. Your likelihood of just saying, all right, okay, bye, you can't, it's a lot harder to do because it's kind of this production, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, he's actually got to be disciplined. Like you need to, commit to your 10-minute opening, even though I don't think the last few that I've seen, he doesn't commit to a 10-minute opening.
Well, I don't look, Darth doesn't absolutely not want a formal debate, right? Because his whole shtick is based on the Socratic method, and that's fine, right? I don't even want to do like formal debate. That's fine. We can just have a discussion. I don't see what the problem is, and all he says is that I want to do something scheduled because Jack Angstrike is going to send me DMs, which is just laughable, right? Jack Angstrike, by his own lights, is a sophist. And he uses sophistry with his arguments. So if that's the case, why would anyone care that I'm getting DM'd sophistry?
You're right. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. I guess on this channel, I would say, yeah, Darth, how about it? You ought to debate Tom Rabbit on MDD. I'm sure James would love it.
Yeah, well, I approached James, and
was he?
Go ahead. Yeah.
No, I was going to say because I think at one point, like, I mean, I know there was a debate, and then Darth got all kind of ticked off at James because James modded his own channel, and that obviously offended Darth. So did he go back after? Has he been back since?
Yeah, I reached out to James, said, would you please reach out to Darth and try to set something up? He said, okay, I'll try. He tried to get in touch with Darth, and Darth refused. He said Darth won't talk to me about he's not open. And then he went on Modern Day Debate with Mark Drysdale. So it's not a thing where he's against going on that show. It's just for whatever reason he don't want to engage me there.
Yeah. Okay.
I think of God as a disembodied mind that is omnipotent, omnipresent, omnibenevolent, omniscient.
No, you're not understanding, because that is what we call perfect being theology. Okay, that doesn't encompass atheism. Atheism is the denial of all God concepts. Okay, so the point is, do you deny that what is ultimate, absolute, the source of all possibility, the ground of all being, and possesses a mind? Do you deny or reject that exists?
No, I don't think so, because I think if I deny this, it will be contradictory. But because you define it this way, but I think that's not generally the concept that theists have of God.
I'm sorry, I was distracted. Something in my home. Can you repeat your last 2 sentences?
Yes, I said that. Okay, first, I just want to clarify something, and then I answer. I make a positive claim that I don't believe in the creation God. Now,
atheism. Listen to me. We are discussing atheism. Atheism is the disbelief and denial of all gods. Okay. Now,
this is so annoying because now Darth. Look, Lazarus presented some well-known, legitimate objections, right? Problem of evil, problem of free will, blah blah blah. And Darth is now, Lazarus is actually entertaining some questions back, right? And Darth is on the offensive. And what he has is the definition of atheism. Why? Who? Why? You know why? Because for Darth, this is just an electrical circuit, and this is the path of least resistance to some kind of gotcha, where they can't prove that no God exists. Yep. Boom.
Yeah, the whole point is to pivot it and get it back to no, you I want you to defend the claim that no gods exist. Like, okay, well, and it's interesting too. Like his sort of like anti-agnostic kind of argument has sort of evolved out of that. So he's, that's why I think like his debates with Randolph Richardson, they drove him nuts, because Randolph just held to that kind of basic position where like, maybe there is, maybe there isn't kind of thing. Like, and whether or not you think of that or not, I think it's kind of weird that Darth doesn't really accept that position as honest from somebody. Like they could put a pin in it and just be like, I'm not convinced one way or the other. He just automatically assumes.
He wants to say, I mean, they want to say, look, I don't believe in God. And then Darth wants to say, oh, well, then if that's the case, you either believe in God or don't believe in God.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes equivocation about like whether you positively are asserting that God does not exist, or you just don't believe in God. But I mean, let's look at it the other way, right? Let's say if I ask Lazarus right now, do you affirm the necessity? Do you affirm it's necessary that no God exists? He would say no, probably. Does that mean that Lazarus believes in God? No.
There's also, to kind of go off what y'all are saying, there is a distinction between, and it's not often used, but there is such a distinction between a global atheist and a local atheist. So like I'm something like a local atheist. I reject a particular conception or a particular conception of God, right? I think that, for instance, the omni-God makes no sense, especially given the existence of evil, okay? But that I don't know. I honestly don't know whether if there's a disembodied mind who's not all powerful, who doesn't know all things, right? That's like half good, whatever that means, right? I don't know if that kind of God exists, right? I haven't even thought about it. Okay. So I don't see that when some people, when they say that they're atheists, they're just talking about a particular conception of God, the conception of God that doesn't make any sense to them, or they don't find evidence for, or whatever. And going back to the JJ example, right? Like if I'm not, if that's how you're going to term God, right? Then I'm not talking. My atheism would be with respect to the other conception of God, not the pantheistic like notion of like the universe is God, right? And I'm not gonna. I don't want to reject that, obviously. So I think that if you identify as an atheist, that doesn't commit you to global atheism.
Yeah. All right.
There is what is the ground of all being, what is ultimate and absolute, the source of all possibility, is a mind. Do you deny that?
I'm agnostic towards that.
Okay, then you're not an atheist.
You see, this is what I just said, right?
Definition of
exactly. When he does that, it's just like, but he'll say like, oh, then you're not an atheist. But it's like, okay, but that doesn't mean he's a believer. And he'll go on to like make that weird argument. There's no such thing as an agnostic because it implies a denial of the God. It's just craziness.
What I would do here is like, okay, I don't really care how you're using the term atheism. In fact, I don't even care how I use it. Here's what I'm saying, Darth. I reject your God. Whatever, I don't care what term you're using for that. I reject this notion of God here. Whatever you call that, I don't care.
Look, Darth's never going to debate me, so I'll just say this. This is how I would do it, right? And anyone who's listening, if Darth tries to get you mixed up in this stuff, just say this. Ask Darth, do you think it is the case that either the Christian God exists or no God exists? Darth is going to have to say, he's going to have to affirm that, right? Because otherwise he's going to say that it's possible that some other God exists, right?
Yeah.
So now you've gotten Darth to say, okay, it's the case either the Christian God exists or no God exists, right? Well, guess what? Now we only need to talk about the Christian God, and then if we show some contradiction there, then guess what? All gods don't exist. We don't have to play any of this game at all. Right?
Yeah.
We can actually distill this entire conversation down to just one God, and everything turns on that by Darth's own lights. So you don't have to talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You're not under. Listen to me. Then you're not an atheist. Atheism is the rejection of all gods. Okay.
Yeah, that would be like calling Muslims atheists because they don't believe.
Okay.
In
Okay. If you say that either atheism is the disbelief in all gods or the disbelief in some gods, well, then that would make me an atheist when I'm a theist because I disbelieve in all other gods except for the Christian God. So that would make a theist an atheist, which would be a contradiction in terms. So you need to make up in your mind: do you reject that what is fundamental, foundational to reality is a mind, a creator? Do you reject or deny that?
Like for the sake of the argument, I will say I reject.
No, I don't want for the sake of argument.
No, I reject.
Do you? Okay. Then when you say evil is a problem, okay, you could only attempt to do that towards certain types of gods, okay. But even if you
sorry, I didn't want to laugh over this, James.
It's just like really like it. Just like I said, you should just avoid all this because I mean I can't say it enough. Just asking that question, but really, what turns on this definition stuff, right?
Yeah,
this that turns on this. This is all just garbage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I would have
tried to-
dropped the term. I would have just dropped the terms because it's just obviously he's going to use the terms to obfuscate the discussion like he's doing.
Yeah.
even if you try it against the Christian God, it still won't work. But that still won't get you to atheism. You said the existence of evil is the reason why there's not a God. But you see, that would only be an attempt at some gods, not all gods. That wouldn't get you to atheism.
I agree. Then how do you think I should call myself?
Okay, this is great. This is great. This is Lazarus's attempt. Like, look, you're just totally caught up in this definition stuff. Mm-hmm. You just tell me what you want me to call myself, right? I don't believe in this. I don't believe in that. Now what? You seem to be really hung up on like you're not an atheist or you deny blah blah blah. Lazarus is saying, you just tell me what word, what utterance you want me to say and refer myself as, and I'll just like a bleep bloop. And I'll just call myself, I'm not an atheist, Darth. I'm a bleep bloop. And I'll just use that word so we can skip all this garbage. But here's the thing, right? To give Lazarus that word would mean skipping all this garbage, right?
Right.
So Darth can't let that happen. So watch what happens.
If you disbelieve in all gods, then you're an atheist. If you don't disbelieve in all gods, then you're not an atheist.
Not an answer to the question.
Okay, will it be
that's fascinating. Okay, then not an atheist. Then what's the label? Just not an atheist? Like, this is just. Oh my god. Okay.
Fair that I'm an agnostic towards certain gods and an atheist towards some others.
Okay.
No.
Hold on a second. I'll be right back.
This is a semantic debate here. Like you're just trying to hold on to this word atheist when it doesn't apply.
He's literally just said, "Okay, you tell me what word you want me to use," and he's being accused of some sort of semantic obfuscation. Ridiculous.
That's B3 for you.
Yeah, that's weird. And it sounds like Darth's. Does he have a dog that's barking in the background? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
I care about how I label myself.
Bro, listen. An atheist means no God.
Okay. Do you believe? Listen carefully. Do you positively believe that what is ultimate, what is fundamental, the ground of all being?
See, and now he's going right back to like what step 2, step 3 in his questions. This is like question the third that he usually gets to people. He's right back to, do you believe in this foundational thing, the source of all possibility and impossibility stuff? Like, I'm pretty sure we've already gotten to the point where Lazarus thinks this doesn't work. Yeah.
And all this leads to the conclusion of all this whole flowchart, right? Do you believe in blah, blah, blah? Next question. Concludes with, you're not an atheist, right? But Lazarus already said, okay, fine, I'm not an atheist. What do you want me to call myself? Right? But
yeah,
like I said, Darth can't answer that question because then this ends.
Right. This is This is snake eating its tail time. I mean, this is rough.
Of all possibility is a mind.
No.
Okay, then you are an atheist in the truest sense of the word.
Oh,
But he's not denying it's possible.
so as long as you reject whatever this absolute thing is personal, i.e., a mind, that automatically gets you into the category of being an atheist.
Yeah,
According to Darth?
pantheists are atheists.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Well, man, he could have avoided a lot of stuff if he had just done that. Like, all he had to do, and that's weird because that's usually pretty close to it. Like, do you believe in a foundational thing? Yes or no? If you believe in a foundational thing, do you think it's personal or impersonal? Could have gotten there a lot quicker than this. I mean, this is torturous.
He's just saying he.
I think it was.
doesn't
I would
believe
think it was. I think it was a means of like running away from the free will stuff and the problem of evil.
Yeah, because I mean, he really has he's kind of run far away from the free, which I think the free will thing. I think he knew he was kind of getting. I don't know if Lazarus was really kind of getting him into a corner. If he was, I think he was starting to kind of paint himself into a corner with some of those answers. So,
No, if you don't believe it in the category of God, it is a denial. You cannot believe that there's gold on Mars without denying it, but that's a category error.
Oh,
If you don't positively believe that all facts depend and derive on God, then you will by default believe in the independence of facts from God, thereby denying God's existence.
That's a very sophisticated argument. I don't know if you guys are going to be able to work
not
that
very
one.
sophisticated.
I understand where you're coming from.
Okay.
Well, it necessarily follows and it's inescapable.
Okay.
Okay. So how is it that there is no creator, Lazarus?
Just trying as hard as he can to just prime the pump for like something that Lazarus doesn't even believe.
Yeah. How is it that the thing that I'm asserting couldn't be the case? Like, what the hell kind of conversation starter is that? All right.
I don't have conclusive reasons to think that there was a creation moment.
That doesn't get you a get out of jail free card. Okay. The fact that you don't have a reason, that you're aware of a reason for God, it doesn't follow from that there is not an ultimate creator.
That's not a refutation of what Lazarus just said. That's really kind of pathetic, because I've heard it's like Darth was waiting for the chance to say that to him rather than listening to what Lazarus said. Lazarus isn't saying he doesn't have a reason to believe it. He's talking about a creation event.
Yeah, Darth is asking this question, and what he means by it is something like, give me the deductive reasoning why a God can't exist. And obviously Lazarus didn't interpret that way. He answered, just his reasons why he doesn't believe in God. And I think right after this, he kind of like affirms that.
Okay. Because now, do you believe as an atheist, since you don't believe that what is fundamental and ultimate, the ground of all being, is a mind, do you as an atheist believe that anything at all is fundamental to all possibility?
I'm not sure to know what that question means.
Is there something?
Yeah, that's my answer right there. A lot of people, I don't know why, but they just like think that's an intelligible question. It's not. I don't think it's intelligible to say there's like there's a source or a fundamentalness to what explains possibility. I mean that's a lot of people reject the coherence of that. So I'm happy with Lazarus's answer.
Yeah.
And I think it's better to be honest about, especially with that one. Like I have no idea what you're talking about, and that one seems to actually lately I've noticed. I think this is gonna. Well, I think my prediction is going forward. I think that's gonna really start triggering Darth more, because if it catches on that people can be honest and be like, that doesn't make any sense. That seems, like either try to flesh that out for me, or if you just leave it sitting like that, it seems unintelligible. I think he's going to start blowing his top if he.
Just think about it, right? Maybe you can think of it this way: they're saying there's a source of possibility, so that source makes possible possibility.
Yeah, what was the possibility for the source?
But yeah, doesn't that there's a problem there, right? Because to say that X is necessary for possibility, necessity is a modal notion. It has to do with possibility.
Right.
So to assert that there's a source of possibility is to presuppose possibility.
Yeah. Yep. No, I see what you're doing.
Thing that is ultimate, fundamental, foundational, that institutes and
It's weird because it's a
Apologies,
worldwide
folks.
pandemic, but I feel
Cha-ching.
like I can bet.
secures the entire range of possibility and impossibility? Or is there nothing singularly dictating all possibility and impossibility?
I would say that what makes something possible or impossible is whether it entails a contradiction or not.
Perfect answer.
No, you're
So-
not. You're not.
Yeah, and that is.
Yeah, that's the meaning of possibility itself. So Darth does want something else, though. What Darth wants is something like almost, I don't even want to say it's causal, but what does possibility depend on? Not what possibility means, but we already discussed the problems with that.
What Darth
Yeah.
really wants to say, I think, in terms that are more understandable, is: do you think that there's something that we can take away, and if we took that thing away, nothing else exists? There isn't anything else because everything depends on that thing, right? That's what I think. Well, he should say if he wants to actually convey it.
Yeah, no, that's right. That's right. Like the way I phrased it just earlier was something like, "What's necessary for possibility?" Right? If that's to say, if X is necessary for possibility, with no X, there's nothing. There's no possibility.
Right. Under Darth's view, look, if we take away God, what's left? Nothing. Do you have in your worldview, is there something that if we take it away, there's nothing? But no, Darth wants to talk about, is it necessary to refer to the necessity of that which is fundamental? And what?
Yeah, and then
It's
he gets
not someone who's trying to actually convey these ideas in a way which are clear.
Yeah, I don't understand. Now thinking about it now, I'm not exactly sure why he would phrase those questions before. We're like, do you believe it's necessary to reference God when asserting facts? And then when they'll say something like, they'll give an answer, he's like, all facts reference God. Like, so what you actually asked, if I were to like cram them together, is, do you believe that a person needs to reference God when asserting a fact? And a fact, by definition, is something which references God. Like,
yeah, that's just the same thing. So, like, it is a fact, right, that the apple is on the table. It's an example, right? An apple is on the table. That's a fact, right?
Right.
So now, what is fundamental in Darth's view is God. Now, if we take away God, right, is it possible that the apple is on the table now? No, because God created everything, right? Without God, there's not going to be anything but God.
Oh, but I think he does. That's what he's looking for. But I think it's weirder with respect, like the apple example. Now imagine the apple instead of an apple. We're talking about possibility itself, right? Because it might be that the case. It might be the case like that. There's a more coherent way of going about this with the principle of sufficient reason, that for every contingent thing you need a necessary thing eventually to explain it, or I don't know, you could talk about that. But Darth is getting even weirder, right? Imagine that apple, not being an apple, but possibility. So like the fact that it's true that I could jump 6 feet in the air, right? The coulddness, he's asking, what does the coulddness depend on?
Yeah.
And that's weird, right? That's so weird. Now you might point to laws, right? And laws are not necessary, and then so he's going to go back to that. So it's just going to end up with like, I mean, it's just weird to ask, what does coulddness depend on, or what does that's what I was trying to say about why people should just reject that there's something fundamental or the source of possibility or coulddness.
Yeah.
You're not understanding.
So-
Let's stop. That's an error. Okay. The laws of logic do not stand in causal relation, sir. The law of non-contradiction does not stand in causal relations. It just stipulates that something cannot be equal its denial or negation. That's it. The law of non-contradiction does not prevent me from jumping to the moon. So all I want to know from you is, do you believe that anything at all is absolute, unchanging, and eternal, that is the ground of all existence?
I don't know if such a thing exists.
Okay, well, that's a problem for you. So now your whole world collapses.
Yeah, that, I mean, the other thing too is that if when he's brought this up with some of, like, you know, the atheists that he's, you know, or some of the philosophers that he's talked with, you know, he'll kind of get them into the same thing, and he thinks the fact that they can't answer this question, for some of them, it's like, I don't know if he is capable of understanding this, but if you run into situations theologically with a lot of Christians about some of the trickier aspects of, you know, the Christian God's nature, whether they think they're being evasive or not, a lot of it will just sort of devolve into, that's a mystery, right? You know, theologically speaking, you can't know the full nature of God. Based on what he's defining in his definition of God, this omnipotent, omniscient, source of all possibility and impossibility, grounding of all reality kind of stuff, how could a human being even comprehend a fraction of what that thing is, outside of what he's attempting to do, which is to use it as some kind of rhetorical device to win arguments? The idea that you could, like, how would you even begin to identify that outside of some kind of theoretical, theoretical exploration? You can't know that thing. And this is one of the weirder things I think is odd about this, because when he asks questions about this, it doesn't seem to matter to him whether or not a person, it seems to me that a person could entertain the notion that that thing exists in an ontological sense. Like, it could be a possibility that there is a being like this, that its existence undergirds all of reality as we know it. But I don't know what it is. Darth goes after the claim of the person, like, yeah, I don't know what that thing is. Couldn't tell you, right? I mean, and that's fair, because categorically, a lot of it is beyond my capacity to know as a human being. But he treats it as if you saying that you don't know whether that thing is real or not, or you're not sure, is the same as denying the possibility that it exists, you know, in the inventory of all of reality. Therefore, you're an atheist and you're wrong. This makes no sense to me. Like, it's like I really do think that he's kind of conflating all the stuff that you can know with all the stuff that actually is. And if you somehow miss this one key component of a thing out there, there's this thing that he calls God that has these properties, and you're not clued into it, and you're not willing to admit that it's actually real, then that somehow affects your epistemology in some weird way. And now you basically can't make claims anymore. You can't even assert facts according to him. This is like the old school. This is like the precept arguments from like 15 years ago, when they would basically just start accusing their interlocutors of not being capable of saying intelligible sentences. Am I being?
Those are the good old days, yeah.
I mean, it just seems like this is kind of like hearkening back to some of that. Like, I mean, it's kind of internalized, but it's bringing back some PTSD.
Yeah, the way if you're wondering how to, like, navigate these debates, just in general, when someone says, like, so what did Lazarus said, I don't know if there's such a thing, right? And then the second that someone tells you that's a problem, that could only mean that there's something that you believe that either commits you to saying that you should accept a particular thing as being fundamental or whatever, or that you're contradicting yourself. And I just don't see any of that, right? When someone says, I don't know what grounds reality, if they're accepting the grounding relation, what is it that they believe that makes it such that they should be not they should actually affirm something? And I just can't think of what that commitment would be, right? And Darth is going to make up stuff, probably in this subsequent few minutes, as to why he should be committed to a particular thing, and I don't think it's going to work.
Yeah, that'll be kind of the trick. By the way, I need to point this out. Otangelo, stop being mean to Pale Blue Mama. Don't do that.
in on you, you're not going to be in a position to say what is, can be, or cannot be. You have now destroyed your ability to speak intelligibly. You couldn't even.
But if that were the case, then you wouldn't be able to have a conversation with him. That is a claim that makes no sense. Of course he's having an intelligible conversation with him. Of course he can assert facts, because by definition, if the facts, this gets me back to that same two-part question. Do you reference God when you assert facts, and then facts as defined by Darth Dawkins reference God by definition? No, I don't need, it's not necessary for me to assert or for me to reference God when asserting a fact if by definition facts reference God, because that's unnecessary. The things that I'm talking about, if they're all dependent on God, they exist because they're dependent upon God. And when I assert a fact about something, it's there because God says it's there. There's this weird two-part agreement that he seems to want. Like, it's not enough for everything to be dependent on God. What also has to be dependent on God is for you to submit to my worldview. You will reference my God when you say stuff. This is weird.
I have another way of maybe rephrasing what you're saying. Like maybe, or at least related to what you're saying, that the word intelligibility, I thought about what that means, and it seems like it's indistinguishable from, like, thinking or deliberating or mental things going on.
Right.
Mind, right? So the fact that he said you don't have intelligibility, or the right, affirms that Darth thinks that there's a thing that should be referred to as a you, which is to say there is an intelligible thing out there.
Right.
So that's one thing that, intelligibility, it seems like a big word or a fancy word, but I just take that to be about minds or points of view or something.
Yeah, and I think in this case, like, if he's trying to say that, like, you lack intelligibility, that would mean that, okay, when Lazarus is attempting to say something, like, if you were to follow, I think, what Darth Dawkins is saying and turn it into a theological precept, then the notion would be sinners can't make sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
And that's the weird aspect of it. It's like, that sinners can get things right. You guys admit this all the time. Atheists can do good things. People can be right about certain moral claims. It used to be enough to say that if you say that this is good and this is bad, you're ripping off my worldview. That's one part of it. But to get to this point where, like, you're not willing to accept my God, then you basically are just, this is anything that comes out of your mouth is gibberish. Like, no, that's not.
I was thinking about this the other day, and I was thinking that even if this is true, right? Darth wants to say, well, then you can't have intelligibility, right? Then nothing. It's necessarily the case that, like, you can't even communicate, right?
Yeah.
Well, just think about this, right? So let's just say that there's no God, and every single interaction between two particles is completely chance, right? And let's just say that but through chance, they just happen to react to one another or whatever, in a way which we perceive, like, currently to be a uniform way, but it's not a uniform way, right?
Yeah.
And under that scenario, right, we would be perceiving intelligibility or a uniformity, right? And there actually wasn't one. It was just pure chance. So even if you grant him this, it's not the case that if everything is not, undergirded by some kind of driving force, whatever, and it's all just completely random, you could still have intelligibility.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and this claim is the one that for me, this harkens back to those early days where, some of these guys would basically just like to say, no, you can't, you don't get to make claims, and you can't have an opinion about anything until you realize that there is only one worldview, and it's the Christian worldview, and get it together. And, like, okay. And of course, then you could get him into an internal thing. I'm like, okay, which Christian worldview is the right Christian worldview? Was it the Catholic one, the Calvinist one, the Arminian, the yeah, who knows?
Even articulate that the sky is blue, because in order to say the sky is blue, that presupposes identity over time, that some things don't change while other things do. Okay, but since you don't believe that anything is fundamentally absolute and consequently imposing actual regularity as opposed to the appearance of it, you've now lost your ability to reason about anything in your atheist world. It's game over for you, sir.
It isn't. He can't demonstrate that this guy has somehow become unintelligible. This makes no sense. This notion of having to reference something absolute in order to be able to assert a fact, especially when by Darth's own admission, a fact already is referencing that same absolute thing. If we all live in his worldview and he's correct, a person not referencing that God could still assert the fact, and the fact is right by definition. This, to me, I don't see how he doesn't get this. But
okay, can I answer that?
Go ahead, be my guest.
Yeah, I don't agree with that because, for example, for me, in my atheistic worldview, when I say that something is true, it's not in reference to anything absolute. It's in reference to some.
You're not understanding.
Can I just?
Listen to me. You're not even understanding what I just said to you. Okay. If you don't believe,
has he even given him enough time to actually explain his statement?
Yeah, I'm not getting enough of Lazarus here to be able to know.
You're right.
That anything is absolute, okay? Then the regularity that you do believe in to say that some things are true is simply an illusion. Understand?
No, he perceives it or believes it to be, but it could be the case that in actuality it isn't. This is the shit that always pisses me off. It's like, well, the problem is that, you know, what you believe, like, yeah, but remember, one of the key things about being a skeptic was that they could be wrong about it. For whatever, this is the strangest thing. It's like Darth's attempting to do an internal critique of what he thinks atheism is and smuggles in all of his biases, and then doesn't realize that a lot of those biases are blowing that up. Like, this does not make sense. Like, no, what the reality for you can't be regular because you don't hold to a God. Hang on, what were you asking them? Whether or not they believe in that regularity, or whether or not they think there is actually that regularity? Those are two different questions.
Yeah, and this intelligibility thing goes. So, like, let's say, because Darth thinks that necessarily it's the case that the Christian God is always truth telling. And why would he say that? Well, because he's committed to saying that, well, if it's possible that God could lie, well, then you wouldn't know when he's lying or not, or what's true and what's not. You wouldn't have intelligibility, right? But let's just say that throughout the entirety of human history, Darth has always told the truth, except for one time where when someone was on their deathbed, he whispered into their ear and said there's an even number of particles in the Andromeda galaxy instead of odd, which is true. Does that mean that now just everything is chaos?
Right.
Does that mean he can't tell someone, hey, go up on this hill and bring back these tablets? Does that not mean anything anymore?
Who knows? Apparently, yeah, with Darth, yeah, what you believe also has to be. This is why he ends up getting the question from time to time. Wait, so the only thing that you can know is something that actually is true, right? And I get that's kind of a sloppy way of asking it, but there's a difference between what people think that they know, and if you're dealing with somebody who's a skeptic, or even somebody from, like, he wouldn't have this issue if he was dealing with like somebody from another religion, right? Or at least I would hope he wouldn't, right? You've got somebody who's a believer, and oftentimes there are a lot of Muslim apologists that kind of use the same kind of precept arguments. So you got somebody using similar arguments, similar reasons to defend their God. Well, they've got some things right and some things wrong. But what does Darth tell a Muslim opponent that he's debating? What is falling apart for that Muslim? Because for that Muslim believes in an absolute being. He believes in Allah that secures the foundation of the universe and all this kind of stuff. I kind of wonder, like, how that now he has to get into some kind of an internal critique that's not, well, I guess he would do it the same way. He would just smuggle in his prejudices and then into an internal critique and then try to blow it up by straw manning. Because that's, to me, I'm starting to think that this is all the guy can do. He pulls in a lot of his own prejudices within the internal critique. He's implicitly straw manning almost everything that he's doing, and then trying to force people to acknowledge this is what you are as an atheist, because I'm defining it that way and it must be right.
Look, Darth has never been able to actually lay out what's incoherent about atheism, right?
No, he's clearly not. Yeah.
Let's just say that instead of Darth's, you tell me what is incoherent about a mind that's fundamental, eternal, blah, blah, blah. His minimalist. Let's just take the not God hypothesis and distill that down to something that would be a quote minimalist definition. So just like, we're matter in motion, as he would say, right? What's incoherent about that? He's not going to be able to tell you. Well, more specifically, he's not going to be able to tell you what's internally inconsistent. He will be able to give an external critique as to why that's incoherent. But who would care about an external critique? Right?
Yeah.
If he accepts external critiques, I would just say, well, Christianity is true because under atheism it's false. Or sorry, Christianity is false because that's under atheism it is, right?
Yeah.
So who would care if he said, atheism is false because under the Christian view it is.
But he does
these sorts of critiques only mean anything when they're internal. But to this day, I don't think he has given an internal contradiction.
No, and I think there's more contradictions, kind of carried into some of the things he's attempting to explain, because I brought these things up to him the last couple of times that I talked to him, and he basically just got, no, you're not understanding what I'm saying. Granted, I told him, like, yes, I agree. I'm not understanding what you're saying. So answer my question. Why do you think this follows? And he wouldn't give it to me. He'd just go right back to trying to ask me questions again. I'm like, well, what the hell ever. So.
How does that follow? I'm not convinced.
You're not. Well, you're not getting this. All right. Do you know what identity over time means?
It depends for what.
Okay. Does anything possess identity over time? Does anything in regards to its essential properties stay the same from moment to moment?
Well, I would say for some interval of time, yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, so if we talk about the sky is blue or the dog is wagging its tail, in order for those statements to be meaningful and intelligible, dogness, skyness, tailness, blueness must remain the same over time in a certain respect. Okay. Now, so if I say to you the dog is wagging its tail, okay, so that means that some things in this world must remain the same, not change, while other things do. Now, if things do not remain the same where they are imposed, but their sameness or similarity is just simply chance, then it ceases to be meaningful to talk about a dog.
Stop there. There.
Is dog...
Okay, so everything that it was painting, right, was just, general good philosophical questions. And then that last sentence, I totally lost him. There is a question about, if if things are moving from moment to moment, what makes it such that they're the same thing? Like these are interesting philosophical questions. Now, I bet that I don't know what this has to do with theism or atheism, right?
Yeah.
But then you need to rewind maybe the last 5 seconds, that's where I totally lost him. I don't know if y'all got it, unless you can regurgitate it.
I
to
don't
me.
even know what he's trying to. But it seems to me kind of like he's saying that, like, Danny, if I say Darth blah blah blah, and you're in your mind you have some kind of concept of Darth, like, I'm of the opinion that we don't have the exact same concept of Darth. We just have this sort of cluster of different, this nebulous sort of, and it's not exactly the same, but that doesn't mean we can't talk about Darth, right? I don't know what he's trying to say. It seems like he's trying to say that.
Well, think about this. Like, you're a bachelor. Now, I think we do share the exact same concept of bachelor. I think because so there's certain things that I think that's why Lazarus was saying, well, yeah, for certain things, like there's like, maybe we could say there's identities through time. And so what constructs our concepts of bachelor, like what bachelor is an unmarried man, seems to be true despite whatever moment we're in. And if there's a particular thing in the world with that property and they're moving through time, that property is going to remain the same or something like that. But where I lost them is in these last 10 or 15 seconds.
Yeah, I kind of wound it back. So let me know if I need to go back just a little bit further.
I'm gonna listen again.
Things do not remain the same where they are imposed, but their sameness or similarity is just simply chance.
Stop there.
Then it ceases.
I don't know what happened there. I don't know how he got that.
So the sameness has to be imposed, and if it's not, that it's simply chance.
What does that even mean?
Yeah, that's odd. So like and this is one of those things. Maybe this gets back to that other thing. So the fact that like the concept of a bachelor or something like that, that notion stays the same through a progression in time. The only reason that that's happening is because God is willing it to be that way. This to me is kind of a weird way. Like, I kind of question whether or not Darth Dawkins thinks that regularity, like, it exists not because the universe is this precision machine that he built, but because without his constant intervention, it would fly into absurdity.
Well, let me try to get at why it doesn't make sense to me. I'm going to go past, like, I don't know what he means, to why I think, how like G.E. Moore, I think he said something like, I don't understand you. It doesn't make sense to me because it doesn't make sense, right? Sometimes things don't make sense to you because you got some work to make sense of it. But when I ask, I don't know how this makes sense, it's because it doesn't make sense. And here's why. I think my notion of chance, right, is strongly tied to like causation, right? So like the fact that, the world, that Mount Everest has a particular height, right? That if we were saying, I think chance makes sense in this case, right? It was by chance that Mount Everest has that height rather than a different height. Okay. But when we're talking about what a thing means, like a bachelor means unmarried man. And there's nothing, it's not that way by chance. Yeah. It just doesn't make sense to say, because like someone someone that accepts a traditional view of like, someone like a Platonist, a Neoplatonist might say something like, a bachelor is an unmarried man, and that's necessarily true, right? Because it's true by meaning. If it's true by meaning, it's necessarily true. So it's not like by chance. It's not like it could have been otherwise. It just doesn't apply. But anyways, so that I'm going to say the timestamp, and I'll listen to it again maybe on my own time. But I don't know how he's got that inference from at 2356. There's something wrong with that inference altogether. I just don't. I don't think that makes any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. If you listen to it and get any insight on it, and you want to let me know, I'd be interested to hear what your take is, because I wasn't following until that last part. That's a little.
Yeah, that's where I lost him. I completely lost him there.
Yeah, that's odd.
Let's try to wrap up the video.
To talk about it all.
Let's try to wrap up the video. We don't want too long of a stream. We want to encourage people that haven't seen the video not to be deterred by 5 hours of video.
Yeah, I think we've got about like Yeah, we got about 4 minutes left. Let's just let it run straight, and then we got to wrap
Okay.
it up. In fact, let me see if I can speed it up a little bit, because I think everybody at this point has probably gotten a little used to hearing Lazarus, and unfortunately, he's not really getting a chance to talk that much. So,
So does dogness at all change? Because does that which dog refers to, does it stay the same, or does it change from minute to minute, hour to hour? Intelligibility requires that some things in actuality do not change. Okay?
I'm not sure I agree with that.
Okay, well, this conversation is going over your head, okay? The very meaningfulness of words means they refer to the same thing in the past as they do in the present. If I say to you dog, if the word dog from one moment to moment changes its meaning or its ontological status, then the word dog loses its meaning. Do you understand?
Yeah, pause it. I'm sorry, because I don't want to forget.
Back on this?
hang on.
I don't want to
Do
forget.
you understand what I just said?
Go ahead.
This is what I was this is what I was exactly saying. It just he's using dogness. I use the term bachelor, right? If I ask someone like, does bachelor carry the same meaning through time? Well, yeah, duh. But necessarily it carries the same meaning no matter what moment you're in. It's the case that bachelor means what it means. It's the case that dogness means what it means, and it's not by chance that it means by that, right? It's
Right.
That's just to say that it couldn't be there couldn't be a world in which dogness had a different meaning, or world in which bachelor had a different meaning, right? And this is why the notion of chance doesn't apply to what a thing means, right? And I this is where Darth is going wrong, I think.
I understand, but I don't agree.
Okay, no, you can't disagree. It's
I think I
uncontroversial.
That's interesting. He can't disagree. So,
No, listen to me. No, I'm sorry to say this. You don't know what you're talking about. Okay, I just explained to you. Do you know what the ontological status means?
No, can you explain?
Okay, we're done, sir. Okay, we're done.
that's classic. Like, I'm going to ask you if you know the definition of this term. No, I don't. No, we're done. We're done.
Okay.
Can you need
no, we're done.
on one thing?
Okay.
Okay, that's a bit sad.
No, we're done. Okay. I just said to you, if things change in their meaning, in the meaning of words and in their ontological status, then you can't have intelligibility. You said you disagree. But then when I ask you, do you know what ontological status is? And you said you didn't know. So you're disagreeing with something that you don't even know. Okay. Did you just disagree that things can't mean things if the ontological status of anything changes? Did you just disagree with that?
I'm not tracking.
I'm not sure what he's talking about. I guess I've never.
Yeah, I would. What did he say? That things don't mean what something about ontology and relating to meaning. I just don't. I mean, it seems like you can, like I said, like if I said bachelor means X, what's the ontology? What does the ontology have to look like for that to be true? Seems like a very, very strange question. Lazarus is totally justified in asking, what do you mean by ontology? How do these things relate? That, like, what does there have to exist for it to be true that a bachelor is an unmarried man, right? And I think that is kind of a strange question. Even if it's interesting, it's strange and deserves time, not dismissal, like Darth just gave.
Yeah.
Listen to me. I think you know, and I know, and everyone else in the room knows that this conversation is way above your pay level. And I'm not trying to speak in a way that you can't understand. I simply said to you, if the ontological status of anything in question does not remain the same in some sense from moment to moment, then you can't speak intelligibly about it. And you disagree with that, right?
Can you explain what is the...
We're done. Go away, little boy. Okay.
Oh.
He has to know. He's not
and then he was muted. Okay.
Either he has the intelligence below that of a child, or he's just being a cordial troll. That's all. Well, would anybody like to ask some questions, comment, agreements, disagreements?
Hi, Darth. Yeah, I think you should title.
That's great. Oh, wait.
Yeah, I hope I get your permission to take some parts of this video for my own channel, because I'm going to title it, a thorough deconstruction of Darth, because I think that's what we've done. I mean, but yeah, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, definitely. I think maybe with the exception of like that one part about the ontological status, because maybe there's something there. Maybe there's something there that kind of explains what I have a difficulty accepting, was that whole idea of him, like I said before, the you must reference God when you assert facts which reference God kind of stuff. maybe that's connected to that. Like, and I'm not sure where he's getting.
This is the most
that concept from.
charitable. Let me give you the most charitable understanding of Darth in that case. This is why I didn't really, I wasn't critical of that, because think about this, right? If it's the case that 3 has the property of being odd, okay, the Platonist is going to say what makes that true is has to do with the fact of the abstract object having that property, which then posits the existence of abstract objects, right? And so a lot of Platonists will say that, look, this is why we have to have these things that exist, like the number 3 has to exist. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to say things like 3 has the property of being odd. Now, the nominalists, you know, which they deny the existence of abstract objects, so they don't think like the 3 exist. They would say, well, look, we can say 3 is odd, but we don't have to postulate an existent property.
Yeah.
They're, you know, and so that is an interesting dialectic. That's not where Darth was going, I don't think, though, right? I mean, in terms of like actually engaging with a serious philosophical issue, right? But I think that's the most charitable interpretation, is that if dogness means X, he wants Darth is on the Platonist side that, well, something has to give its meaning throughout these various moments. And then Darth wants to say God, right? God gives it its meaning and ontologically, in the same way that the abstract object 3 makes it true in a way where we can say 3 is odd. Okay. All interesting stuff, but of course, Darth is not going to do justice to the issue.
Yeah. Yep. So I guess I'm going to give you guys final words then. So we've broken this down. We made it all the way to he muted Lazarus and then auto banned Misanthropic. I could stand to listen to a little bit more of Misanthropic. That was pretty funny.
Well, I gave my last word. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
absolutely.
thanks for having me. Subscribe to Tom Rabbit, of course. And I put out a lot of content last month, so almost a video every single day.
Yeah, you did. Yeah, you were marathoning it. So
plenty of stuff. And so yeah.
Oh, subscribe to my channel too.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Danny's channel's Phil Talk. Both links are in the description. So I guess that's it for tonight. Thanks everybody for showing up. Thanks everybody for comments and all that kind of stuff. And we are out of here.
All right.